Murderers don't come out at dark with long teeth and saliva dripping off his chin. A rather eerie quote by serial murderer Ted Bundy, America's most notorious serial killer. He confessed to the murder of 37 women across 7 U.S. states. A seemingly innocent man, Theodore Robert Bundy, was arrested and confessed to the murders of over 30 women in the 1970s. His trial gained mass media attention and helped kickstart America's never-dying interest in serial killers. One reason Bundy was so popular with the public was because of his American dream-like lifestyle and his influential personality. Despite his rather harsh and confusing upbringing, Bundy was born November 24, 1946, in a home for unwed mothers in Burlington, Vermont. His mom, Eleanor Louise Cowell, was considering putting him up for adoption, but her dad, Sam Cowell, wanted the baby to join the family over in Philadelphia. Then Theodore Cowell began living with his family in Philadelphia, believing that Louise was his sister rather than his mother, and his grandparents were actually his parents. Nonetheless, in the book The Stranger Beside Me by Anne Rule, she states that Bundy knew the lie. Maybe I just figured out there couldn't be a 20 years difference in age between a brother and a sister, and Louise always took care of me. I just grew up knowing that she was really my mother. Some of Bundy's actions as a child were rather off-putting. Once his aunt woke up to Bundy placing knives near her bed. Psychiatrist Dr. Dorothy Lewis said that only in very seriously traumatized children who have either themselves been the victims of extraordinary violence or have witnessed extreme violence among family members would do something like this. Bundy's mother would give him the new last name of Nelson before leaving Philadelphia and his family at 3 years old to move to Tacoma, Washington. Her mother began seeing a man named Johnny Bundy. This will become his third and final last name. Johnny and Ted's relationship was never healthy. Bundy was upset Johnny couldn't provide him with his expensive belongings he desired. As Ted got older, he began to verbally provoke his stepfather, who would occasionally snap at him. Bundy had violent childhood behaviors. He would set up traps under leaves to trip other children. He was into detective stories involving rape and murder. He would even masturbate in his middle school closets, getting soaked in water when his peers caught him. He would shoplift ski gear, attempt to steal a car, and spy on people through their windows. He was a religious man who had graduated from the University of Washington with a bachelor's degree in psychology, pursued a career saving lives in social services, and enrolled in law school in the early 70s. A Mormon missionary who himself baptized Bundy said, "I wouldn't hesitate to line him up with my sister," while a campaign co-worker described him as Kennedy-like. By all means, Bundy was the average guy next door. He was the first serial killer who didn't come off as an outsider to the public. It was widely known that he could manipulate his personality to fit into the social situation he was in. Being so charismatic, he was able to effortlessly abduct and subdue young women. The first reported victim of Bundy was in 1974, though he was accused of earlier murders. One potential victim of Bundy was 8-year-old Anne Marie Burr, who, on August 31st, 1961, vanished from her Tacoma house, only living a few miles away from Bundy. It's possible he'd been spying on homes through windows and saw an opportunity. Bundy denied that he had killed her, but claims that there are more unofficial victims out there. In 1974, 6 girls were abducted in only 6 months. Chaos erupted when Janice Ann Oates and Denise Mary Nesland disappeared from a crowded beach at Lake Sammamish State Park in broad daylight. But this was also the first big break in the case. Several other girls reported a good-looking man in an arm sling trying to lure them to his brown Volkswagen Beetle. The name that he gave was Ted. After police released a full description, 4 people called and identified the Seattle man by the name of Ted Bundy. These 4 people were Bundy's ex-girlfriend, Bundy's old psychology professor, a co-worker, and a close friend of his. Ted Bundy was dismissed as a subject. The police called for an extensive investigation and approached many government agencies to find the girls that were missing, including the one Bundy worked for. More and more descriptions began to match Bundy and his Volkswagen. His bodies were being discovered around the same time that he was accepted into the Baguette School of Law in Utah. After he moved, so did the killings. Evidence continued to stack against Bundy. In 1975, Bundy was pulled over and police found a mask, gloves, a flashlight, and more. He was then finally put under surveillance. In his Beetle, police found hair that matched with 3 victims. A woman named Kathy Kleiner was able to escape after being abducted by Bundy, his only living victim, ultimately leading to his arrest after pointing him out in a police lineup. He was put into jail with kidnapping and assault. Meanwhile, police were trying to build a murder case on him. In 1977, Ted Bundy would leap to freedom from the second story of a courthouse in Aspen, Colorado.
Bundy jumped out of this second-story window at the front of the Pitkin County Courthouse this morning. He was scheduled for a court appearance and apparently had been locked into the law library by sheriff's deputies while attorneys were arguing a motion to strike the death penalty. Witnesses say he left in a hurry, however, nobody saw him open the window.
Since he was acting as his own lawyer, he was allowed into the library during a break. After stealing a car and fleeing, he was recaptured only 6 days later. Though, again in December of the same year, he escaped his jail cell through a small hole he had made in the ceiling.
Bundy had climbed into a ventilating duct and escaped again.
He began cutting back on food just to squeeze through. He then changed into civilian clothes and literally walked out the front door. He then took a flight to Florida with the money that his girlfriend had been sneaking into him, where he evaded recapture and continued killing. On January 15th, 1978, he broke into a Chi Omega sorority where he sexually assaulted and killed Margaret Bowman and Lisa Levy in just 15 minutes. Bundy struck again on February 8th. He kidnapped and killed 12-year-old Kimberly Diane and hid her body on a pig farm. Finally, in February of 1978, he was pulled over in a routine traffic stop and arrested after the officer found IDs of 3 dead women. The criminal trial of Ted Bundy was hands down one of the most intense criminal trials to date. This was the first ever criminal trial of its kind to have nationwide live television coverage. The 1976 trial was comparable to a major sporting event. The whole country seemed to be following the course of the trial. At this time, Bundy was only being tried for the kidnapping of Carol DeRange. After being found guilty, he was faced with 1 to 15 years in prison. While locked up, he was charged with his first murder case, Karen Campbell of Colorado. This caused Bundy to be transported to a Colorado state prison to be tried in the state of the crime. He continued to plead his innocence and fight the case himself after firing his lawyers one by one on live television in dramatic fashion. This only stirred up the media more. Thankfully for Bundy, his future attorney was able to use these outbursts as an excuse to push back the date of his execution. In 1977 alone, he managed to escape from custody on 2 separate occasions, making headlines across the nation. Bundy was determined to be a free man. He acted as if he was starring in his own Quentin Tarantino movie. During the trial, he was able to marry his longtime girlfriend, Carol Ann Boone, through a loophole in the Florida judicial system.
Defense called only one witness, Carol Boone. Acting as his own lawyer, Bundy questioned her about his character. She said he's a kind, warm, patient man, a very positive part of her life. Then the convicted man popped the question.
Carol, do you want to marry me? I want to marry you. And I do.
An untimely event considering she was testifying on his behalf. After that very same trial, he was sentenced to execution by electrocution. The impending death did not stop Bundy from his love life. Bundy and his wife conceived a child during prison visits. They even got caught in the act by a prison guard. Eventually, she gave birth to their daughter, Rose Bundy. He continued to raise the child behind bars, yet again in 1984, prison guards found signs of Bundy planning another escape. There were signs of sawing on the cell bars and hidden mirrors in his cell. The Federal Bureau of Investigation reached out to Bundy for assistance in establishing the Behavioral Science Unit. The BSU specializes in establishing criminal profiles on serial killers with the goal of explaining why these crimes were committed, how these crimes are committed, and who committed these crimes. He ended up confirming the Bureau's suspicions about serial killers as well as tacking on new information of his own. Bundy himself worked closely with the cases and even started bringing them his own cases after they had solved them. The FBI soon sat Bundy down with psychiatrists who specialized in the criminal psyche. She diagnosed Bundy with having manic depressive disorder as well as psychotic tendencies. He was then able to plead insanity due to his manic episodes. This allowed him to push back the execution date and stand trial once again. He was able to continue to push back his execution until January 24th of 1989. Days before his execution, he sat down with an FBI special agent again. This time, Bundy came clean. He once and for all broke his innocence stance. That afternoon, Ted Bundy confessed to over 30 murders as well as several accounts of necrophilia. If you don't know what that is, I'm gonna save you the trouble. He confessed to this happening in 7 U.S. states in a shocking and dramatic tell-all. Unfortunately for Bundy, on Tuesday, January 24th, 1989, he was sent to the chair for his execution after denying his last meal. Outside of Florida State Prison were television satellite trucks covering the execution. This was the first time satellite trucks were used to cover an event of this kind. Outside of the prison walls, thousands of people gathered around to watch the execution take place. Many people were selling numerous keychains and shirts reading phrases like, "Tuesday is Friday," and "Burn Bundy Burn."
Ted Bundy, even in death, stirred hatred. An unprecedented crowd of hundreds started gathering before dawn. It took on a macabre circus-like atmosphere. Is this what you expected to find when you come out here? Folks dancing and singing. Yeah. But in the death chamber, Bundy was uttering his final words.
All he said is, "I'd like you to give my love to my family and friends." That was Ted Bundy's last statement.
Many in attendance were college kids drinking and partying and waving around homemade posters, like they're at some high school football game. Once and for all, Ted Bundy's ashes were spread across the Cascade Mountains in the state of Washington, alongside multiple victims, just as he had asked for. Days before the execution, Bundy had sat down with a journalist to help him write a book about himself, in which he said, "I don't care what you say, just make sure it sells," most likely a direct result of his narcissistic personality disorder. Judging from the countless books, movies, and articles we see about his story today, it did exactly that. His story sold like sliced bread. Theodore Robert Bundy grew to be so infamous because of his unsuspecting demeanor, the mass media attention surrounding his case, and his movie-like story. He became the poster boy for serial killers for the entire nation. Bundy now has a Netflix original hit documentary series, Conversations with the Killer, The Ted Bundy Tapes, countless books, articles, and case studies about him, even getting played by famous actor Zac Efron in Netflix's release, Extremely Wicked, Shockingly Evil, and Vile. Through being the first seemingly normal, sophisticated killer and his dramatization of events, he sparked American citizens' never-dying interest in serial killers.